listen to the Convocation Unscripted live. This is where religion, culture, and politics intersect in real time. And once a month, we do this live, not so we can just talk to each other, so we can talk to you. So I'm going to remind you right here at the top of the show, drop your questions in the Q&A box. If you put your question just in the chat, we're going to lose track of it. So use the Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your toolbar. It's a big Q and a big A. And of course, as always, I'm one of your hosts for this episode, Jamar Tisby, joined by Diana Butler-Bass.
Hey, Jamar.
And congratulations on book number 12. If you haven't already gotten it, A Beautiful Year, what are you waiting for? We're going to drop a link in the chat. So all you have to do is click. It's one click away. So we are joined by Diana Butler-Bass as well as Kristen Dumais.
Hey guys, and hello to everybody who is joining us. And yes, please do put your name in the chat and let us know where you're from. Good to see you all.
And of course, Robbie Jones, who's going to have a lot to say this episode as we kick it to you for the data and the numbers in so many ways. So, of course, we're scholars, 3 historians and a sociologist / honorary historian who explore how religion shapes America's past and present. But of course, we're responding in real time to the events of the day. No prep, no scripts, just raw, unfiltered conversation. That's why we call it the Convocation Unscripted. And this episode is live. We are now in session. Hey, folks, it's good to see everybody, all 4 of us here. It's becoming a special occasion because we're all so busy and on the road. I think what's top of everyone's minds, and again, for the folks tuning in live, we are only going to talk for about half this time. We want to hear from you. So please do drop your questions in the Q&A function. I think on top of everyone's mind, we're recording this on a Thursday. There were some big elections this past Tuesday. Before we dive into the data, I just want to focus on feelings, reactions, reflections as you saw the results coming in. Is there a word, a phrase, a feeling that you can describe? Let's start with the folks near DC because you're very directly affected. Robbie, what were you thinking or feeling?
Well, look, I just want to make sure Diana sees I'm wearing my Matisse shirt for A Beautiful Year this year, right? Kind of goes along with your book cover. And just I do want to say again, just congratulations, Diana, on the book coming out this week. It's amazing read, and as I've said, it's the thing. If you're wondering, you may be wondering less after this Tuesday, but if you're have that feeling, how am I going to get through this next year between now and the next midterm elections? Diana's book's got your back. So you put on your nightstand, you can follow throughout the year. It's 52 meditations, 1 per week. So you can just kind of walk with Diana through the liturgical calendar and all the way to the midterms next year. So anyway, I'm feeling, I guess, cautiously optimistic. I'm always a little reticent to read too much into off-year elections, especially off-year elections, which these are. But I mean, it was a pretty clear sweep, across the board. I mean, there really wasn't anything I could look at. And, when you look at the, and I would say we'll get into some of the data in a minute, but, Virginia is really the place to look. It's the most kind of generalizable. We have a big exit poll from the whole state. It's a state that it sort of leans blue, but not too much. Plenty of rural areas there. And so I think I put a link actually in the chat to the CNN exit polls for the Virginia governor's race, just if you want to kind of start looking around there, and we'll talk about a few of the little highlights there. But I think for me, cautiously optimistic. And then also some news we'll talk about later on today that also is kind of feeding my optimism for the moment.
Well, being a person who lives in Virginia, off-year elections kind of mean everything to us because what has happened this week will set the next 4 years in the state in which I live. And I can remember how completely devastated I was when Glenn Youngkin won. I knew that was going to be tough. And then the state government was also very equally divided at that time. So the future was a lot more up in the air as to how things were going to work out. Youngkin wound up being kind of not as bad as he could have been, because eventually the Democrats got enough control back in the state house that they were able to basically veto most of the things he tried to do. But he did some things that feed into the national narrative that he had power to do, like replacing the entire board of the University of Virginia. And just this week, the University of Virginia caved into the Trump demands. And so, had Youngkin not been elected last time, there was a lot of resistance at UVA. I think they would have stood up against the Justice Department and what they're doing to universities. But as it was, the leadership was all Youngkin appointed leadership. And this is the way Virginia works. And whoever's the governor has enormous power to appoint boards and these sorts of positions all across the state. So now we'll have a new governor. And the big shock, the thing that I was thinking more than anything else on election night, despite the fact it was the release day for my new book, was that when the returns started coming in, I started looking at the House of Delegates, which is the lower house of the state government, and that we reelect them once every 2 years, so the whole group is up. And I don't know what the final count is, but as of election night, it looked like 64 Democrats were going to be in the House of Delegates. And that was just shy of a Democratic supermajority in the House of Delegates, so that Abigail Spanberger and her team will have the actual ability to pass laws. And it's astonishing, frankly. I looked back. I could not find a time since before the Voting Rights Act that Democrats had that much control in Virginia state government. And so the last time they were in control, they were basically all Jim Crow racist Democrats. And that was no good for anybody. So now we've got this other group, which is just amazing, very diverse in terms of their politics. We've got centrists, we've got liberals, we have progressives, kind of a la Bandani. We have people who are gay and straight. We have a couple trans legislators. We have younger people. We have older folks. We have people who are first generation. We have old Virginians, the old Virginia names. It is just an astonishing group of people from every racial background you can possibly imagine. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how these folks move our state toward a far better expression of democracy, and maybe push Thomas Jefferson's vision further than it has been pushed in the past.
Kristen, what about you?
Yeah, we didn't have a lot going on over here in Michigan, just kind of city level. And so I have a bit of a distance between from me to the national races, or to the different state and city races that really caught everybody's attention. So I'll speak more generally, and I'll speak from the perspective of kind of my hobby, which is watching people on the right. Watching the Christian right in particular. And what I can say is they're not at all happy. They're scrambling. Actually, it was a couple of weeks ago that I first started noticing, like quite suddenly, a slew of Islamophobic posts. And I thought, what is this, 2003? I hadn't seen that kind of rhetoric in a long time. And it took a minute for me to realize, oh, this is about Mamdani, right? That's what this is about. And honestly, let me just say, like, the rhetoric from Christian leaders about that race was chilling. I saw language used that is, if you are a scholar of genocide, it is extremely problematic language of parasites, the swarm, that this was an invalid election because it's a swarm of immigrants who voted, not real Americans, and so on and so forth. So I was watching a lot of that happening on the right, and also watching inside those spaces a lot of scrambling and internal division around the Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Kevin Roberts kind of meltdown around anti-Semitism, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing. And so there's a lot of infighting right now, and a lot of scrambling happening on the right. And frankly, I find that all encouraging, delightful even in some cases, right? And so I think that combined with these other things, the election, I think, really has set the MAGA world back a couple of steps, certainly. And I think perhaps most importantly, reminds the rest of the country this is not inevitable, right? This slide into authoritarianism is not inevitable, and ordinary people can show up and make a difference. So anyway, I took this all as a positive set of events, and I'm feeling better this week than I was last.
Hey, Kristen, it's worth noting the new lieutenant governor of Virginia is the very first ever Muslim woman
Yes.
to be elected to any statewide office anywhere in the United States. And she's very well liked and has handled herself quite beautifully in a genuinely open and thoughtful campaign.
There's so much to unpack here. When I was watching, I was pleasantly surprised at how quickly the results came in, which spoke to how decisive the victories were. Even just a year ago, when we were looking at the presidential election, we were thinking, well, it might be a week or several weeks before we get the count and all that stuff. And certainly with other elections, from midterms to state and local elections, that's often the case these days. But they were calling it before bedtime, which was nice because you could go to sleep on election night. I think all eyes were not only on Virginia, but New York City and Mamdani and everything he represented demographically as a Muslim, as a South Asian, and as a democratic socialist. So that was an impressive win because he didn't hide that stuff. He couldn't in a lot of ways, but also he didn't want to. And he ran on that platform and not only won, it was the biggest turnout in decades, actually, and won handily. So that was impressive to me. Then I became reflective. I became reflective in the sense that whenever we are sort of pleasantly surprised or we get the electoral results we hope for, I always think if more of us had more of a taste of real democracy and a high functioning government, would we be even more encouraged? Would we be even more motivated? So my hope going forward is that in some pockets where these folks have won, you can see some real big differences that will serve as proof points for other parts of the country. And so it makes me, remember and recognize and understand a little bit better historically how oppressed people still appealed to the promise of the United States, the principles of democracy and freedom and being able to transcend whatever the circumstances of your birth were to sort of fulfill your idea of what it meant to have a life that was flourishing. And so moments like these just are a very helpful reminder, Kristen, as you said, that it's not all inevitable and that in the truest sense of democracy, the power really is in the hands of the people.
California is a great example of that, interestingly, in the same election, too, because California, usually their votes don't effectively count in a lot of elections because they're a very democratic state and they're out there on the West Coast. And so everything comes in late to them. Well, they just turned out an electorate that was the same size as the last electorate that they had for a statewide election. So it was more than 10 million people who came to the polls. And I love the way that several people have pointed this out. David Korn, I think, was the first person I read it from, is they came to the polls to express their assent to an idea. That there was no person on the ballot, but there was only an idea. And that idea was that we have to have free and fair elections. and that they still believed in democracy. And to see 10 million Californians come to the polls and wait in long lines to be able to tell the rest of the country, we are with you. We believe in democracy, and California's got your back. And that was, to me, that was very moving. I lived in California for a lot of my adult life. And yeah, I mean, the idea there was they wanted to say something about democracy, and they took the opportunity that was put in front of them to do that.
Mm.
All right. I want to follow on that because I'm with you. I am still a little sad, I have to say, that the step that they took to protect democracy is
Yeah.
actually a step away from a long-term stability of democracy, right? So that's the moment we're in where we have to kind of take a step toward gerrymandering in one place, right, to protect against gerrymandering in another place, right? And so it's a short-term patch on a very long-term problem. And it's a good one, and I think it's the only thing to do, practical thing to do in this moment. So I'm all for it. But I do just like register my sadness, right? Because we really ought to have all the states moving in the direction of having nonpartisan commissions to draw these districts so that it doesn't turn into this race to the bottom to see how many uncompetitive districts we can possibly have that are predetermined. And by the way, that always end up disenfranchising voters of color, right? That's always been by the way, I did look up because I'd forgotten the gerrymander. You guys, how many of you know like the story about what the term, the etymology of the term?
Yes,
You're asking us?
of course.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks
Yeah, go,
like the
go,
salamander, right?
Yeah. So the governor's name was Jerry, right? And
Yeah.
he commissioned these people to draw these wild districts. And yeah, it looked like a salamander. It was so crazily drawn with legs and a tail that went way out to the river and a head over here. And they took his name Jerry and the word salamander, and we get gerrymander, right, from that thing. So anyway, I hope that, like, yes, this is a patch, this is a band-aid on a very acute problem. Hopefully long term, yeah, we'll kind of turn it back around the other way, and California can go back to trying to draw their districts more fairly.
So I hear what you're saying, Robbie, and I'm speaking from Michigan, where we did go through a redistricting and nonpartisan commission, right, and has made a really big difference in our state. But this is so funny. I'm the optimist this week because I have long felt that, like, oh, you don't want to go that, but now I see that this is the step not away from it, but toward it, right? That the Democrats have to show some strength here and have to take this route to get to a wider consensus that we need to do this differently. So I don't love that this is the path, but I am glad that we are now walking down the path because I think it is the only one that we have. But we do have a question, and we may not switch to questions like across the board yet, but I want to use this to pitch it back to you, Robbie, because you are the numbers guy, right? And you have some things to tell us about, what you saw at a more granular level. But one of the questions that we got from Elizabeth is this really turning the tide? Now, we can't say for sure. And, I gave the little promotional boost that just thinking it's not inevitable is absolutely critical to turning the tide. So how about what are you seeing in the numbers? What numbers strike you as particularly promising, and which ones are maybe a little overblown?
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks for that. So I do want to also want to just make sure, Diane, I think your point about turning out for an idea is really important. I don't want to kind of run roughshod over that because it's hard to turn people out for, like, we're going to do something kind of tactical to save democracy is not exactly a thing to get people out of bed and go to the polls, but it turns out actually it was, right, in that case. That's really important. The other thing I want to say about the election before getting to the numbers is, as far as I know, do we have any major outliers? I don't think we do, of people saying it was rigged. Like what I think I've seen across the board is people, Democrat, Republican, conceding their races when they lost. And actually, that's something we ought to just pause and celebrate too, right? So like I want to like hats off to the losers, right, of the elections, right? No, and I'm deadly serious here, right? That losers have a role to play in democracy. Like you run a campaign, you give it everything you've got, but when the tally comes up short, and the role is to say, "Wow, like I'm disappointed, I'm sad, I'm thank you for everyone who supported me, but." We lost the campaign, even though we gave it our all, and I wish the best to my political opponent. Like that's democracy. It's a huge actual ritual that often goes unsung. And I just want to say that, as far as I can tell, that basically happened across the board. Both Republicans and Democrats that lost conceded the elections, and they're fairly clean. There wasn't, and also want to say, not a lot of sign of voter fraud. The elections were conducted with integrity. People can trust the outcomes. That's a huge deal that we should support. I'll just point to a couple things. You can like look at the exit polls. A lot of the same patterns, that we see typically were there. It is pretty striking, though. I'll just point to a couple things that just stood out to me, and I'm going to speak mostly from Virginia. I've got one example from New Jersey to give, but mostly from Virginia because I think it's the most representative statewide elections we have to look at. But it is notable to me, if you got that link I put in the thing. If you look at the gender by race outcome here, and it broke out like white men, white women, black men, black women, Latino men, Latino women, and all other voters, Spanberger won every one of those categories except white men, right? So majorities of white women, black men, black women, Latino men, Latino women, all other voters that are in those groups. The only group out of all that were white men. And just so like letting that sink in a little bit, right? If you look at white voters, it's white voters voted for Earl Sears and all voters of color, 83% for Spanberger. But it really is, if you look underneath the white voters, it's men, it's white men that are kind of the holdouts there, and education also, and the evangelical born again number we know and see, and again it was 80% voting Republican in Virginia, just right on kind of where we see it. But to the question of turning the tide, the one number that I would have I told Kristen we were talking beforehand, if there's a number I kind of want to just like hang my hat and hopes on, if I kind of turn against the worst of the MAGA movement here, it's that voters in Virginia, it wasn't just that Trump voters stayed home. The numbers look fairly comparable in terms of the split between people saying they voted for Trump or voted for Harris, who actually turned out and voted. But what is notable is that while almost all of Harris's voters voted Democrat, 7% of Trump voters also voted Democrat, right? And I think this, that's not a huge number. It's not as big as you might think it should be based on kind of everything that's going on. But 7% of people who voted for Trump just a year ago, right, have switched and voted for the Democratic governor. And I think that's big. And one more I'll point to is Latino numbers. So in our previous conversations, I kind of raised the issue that Latino voters in our national polls have been dropping in their support for Trump since the election, right? So they went from 39%, which wasn't high in the first place, 39% favorability for Trump, down to 30% for Trump so a 9-point drop in favorability. And we also saw, if you look at some places like Manassas, Virginia, Union City, New Jersey, that have heavy Latino populations, there are just massive swings there there's like a 70-point gap, right, in Union City, New Jersey,
Wow.
for example, that I think is like really huge. That city is like 82% Latino, and Harris won it by a 17-point margin, and in New Jersey the Democrat won by 70-point margin in this election. So it's a big shift, and I think that's what we saw in the polls, is that what we know about Latino voters that voted for Trump is it was largely driven by economic issues and blaming Biden for the economy. And the party in power owns the economy, right? And I think that was largely what it was. What we hear now is still the same thing. The economy, I'm not doing any better. In fact, I'm worse. And the other thing that stood out is ICE and harsh immigration policies among Latinos, and even among Latino Protestants that are more conservative are saying, "Oh, no, that's not what we signed up for." So back to this is not inevitable. I do think it's like sinking through. We're just kind of seeing some turns, even from people who were all in for Trump just a year ago.
Just want to chime in and remind people to drop your questions in the Q&A. We're up to 10 different questions, and we will be transitioning to that in just a moment. But just wanted to hear any more reflections or reactions we had based on the numbers breakdown, which was so excellent. Thank you, Robbie.
It was just really helpful. And I was saying during the Harris election, I thought that if we could swing maybe 5% of white women, that it would win an election. And some of the data you present really does point to white women being a problem in voting, and also a potential swing group, at least a portion of them that are not evangelical women. So when we're always looking for people who are in territory where they might vote one way and might vote another way, there are some hints that might be the case among a certain proportion of white women, which I was encouraged to see. And then I kept thinking, who are these women? Where do they live? Who do they talk to? What are their media sources? What are they really thinking about right now? And those are questions I can't answer because I'm a historian, so I can answer them in 50 years, but not today.
With the Virginia figures, you said before that, Virginia, right outside DC in particular, has been really hit hard by some of the administration's decisions, right? Particularly the dismantling of the federal government. And, so what we're seeing is a lot of people kind of have to live into this reality. We can be talking at people, we can be, reading Project 2025 out loud, we can do all these things, but until it hits people personally, I was just in the grocery store thinking, wow, I've never seen a bag of chocolate candy bars price $25 for this little bag of minis, right? Because
Yep.
chocolate, tariffs. And, another thing that we should talk about is SNAP, right? How this, we're talking two big things, I think, coming up this month. SNAP and possibly a 10% reduction in the flights in this country because of the shutdown and not paying federal workers, right? So I feel like we're on the brink of the ripple effects of more and more Americans feeling personally the repercussions of electing this administration. So we should probably talk about SNAP a little bit. Robbie, you were saying just before we came on, there was a ruling. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, I just saw it literally as we were breaking for the New York Times, just as we were signing on, that Judge McConnell has, who issued the original order that they had to pay. So just to remind everybody, this is a program for low-income people that sort of provides food, right, for hungry children and families. It affects 1 in 8 Americans, right? That's how big this program is. Very, very important. So tried to use this leverage in the shutdown war, right, to kind of cause pain. And we're saying they weren't going to pay the benefits, even though there's a reserve fund explicitly set aside for this purpose. And by law, it's required to be used in such a thing. They had to get a judge to force the administration to do it. Then the administration tried to pay only a part of them and was even going to try to delay it so it wouldn't even kick in till next month through some administrative shenanigans. The judge came back in and said, nope, you cannot pay partial benefits. The law says you have to pay them all, and you have to pay them in full, and you have to do it in a timely manner. So that's just off the bench, and we'll see what happens now. But we've got another very firm ruling that this is the law of the land, and this is what you have to do. So hopefully that'll go through, because I mean we're already seeing food banks completely overrun. By the way, if you do have the ability to support your local food bank, now is a good time to do that. Yeah.
So just on the analysis point, and then we can transition into questions. So be picking and choosing which ones y'all want to start with first. One of the thoughts that I have is why such a big turnout, and what were folks responding to? And I think we've named all the different issues, but just to put them together, SNAP is a big one. And it landed at a time, it landed near the elections. And so that was top of people's minds, that, like you said, Robbie, 1 in 8 Americans are facing food uncertainty when they really don't have to. Like, it's not a matter of not having the policy or the budget for it. It's a matter of Republicans not releasing the funds that could be a stopgap in November, and also not gathering to actually try to hammer out a deal to open the government. Nobody's happy about that. Another one, I think this is sort of a throwback to the civil rights movement. Those videos of ICE brutalizing and abducting people are having an impact. Like, most regular people see that, and no matter where you stand on policy, it's abhorrent. I just saw a story today where ICE abducted a father. The toddler was in the back seat of the car. They drove off with the toddler in the back seat of the car. I saw another one where they abducted someone at a daycare facility, children around, other parents, other workers around. So these things are egregious to most everyday people, and they're responding to that. And then, of course, the economic issues. Yeah, the candy for Halloween was absolutely astronomical, and all kinds of regular, everyday goods, these so-called kitchen table issues. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't pay that close attention to government, whether at the federal or the state or the local level. What they pay attention to is how easy or hard life is. And what's happening now are the policies from this regime are impacting people on a real, everyday basis. And I think that was part of the response, as well as the people who do pay attention and are absolutely fired up about what's happening and want to be part of the solution. So I think there's a complex of issues. There's probably even more going on than that, but people are feeling it, and it did give me a sense of hope that there's some fight left in us, and that it showed up at the ballot box, not just protesting on the streets or sending out a social media post, as valuable as those can be, but actually using the electoral system to affect change.
I was going to say that's a really good question, Jamar, because I was on the road basically the last 2 weeks, and the single most commented on political thing that I heard in all of the, going through airports and being in Ubers and all this kind of stuff was a really surprising one. And that was the president tearing down the White House.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wish it was about people being kidnapped off the street, but the iconic videos and pictures of the White House with that gigantic hole in the side of it, people were angry and shocked. And I heard that from people who don't pay any attention to politics on any kind of regular basis, because what you're doing is you're taking an iconic vista that people think is never going to change. And Trump changed it, man. And people are not buying it.
I think that hit me hard too, just the symbolic act, because even though I know intellectually that it's not going to work this way, I still find myself wanting to think we can go back to normal, right? We can clear this out. We can go back to normal. And that just says you're never going back to normal, right? Like, we can create something new. We can try to, heal and fix some of the things, but it's not, you can't go back, right? It was just like this visual. And I thought too, how the outcry would have been just absolutely just overwhelming if somehow the roles had been reversed. Like, imagine if Barack Obama had decided to do that, and just like boom, just on his own, just I'm going to do this because I will, I want to put in an indoor basketball court here, right? Just, and how, again, the kind of the narratives, this is what we're living with. But as we're talking about all these things, I'm thinking of Susie had a question here that actually engages all of these. What of the legion of Trump's egregious actions, Epstein? Thank you. Let's talk about Epstein. Let's just keep talking about Epstein. Epstein, the shutdown and SNAP, the East Wing, ICE, tariffs, which are most likely to get the low-hanging fruit of those who might switch loyalties. And she cites Robert Schenck here, who says if we could shave off 11% of MAGA, it would swing us in the right direction. Frankly, I think if we can shave off 5%, it's going to swing us in the right direction, right? So which of the issues, and that's interesting, Diana, you heard a lot about the East Wing. I'm wondering, that's not done yet, right? Johnson just keeps, giving holidays, another week off, to the House, right? As soon as they reconvene, we get things in motion to release those Epstein files, and rumors are circulating that what's in there is really, really bad, and there is a reason that they're going through extraordinary measures to keep those sealed. So I don't know. What do you think? All of the above? Which ones are going to surface? I think that the answer is we don't yet know.
Well, it's worth remembering that like one of the reasons why Johnson's not bringing Congress back is because there's a new member of Congress he's refusing to swear in.
Exactly.
Right. So, so it's Adelita Grijalva, who won a special election in Arizona. And that's been like weeks and weeks and weeks. And there's actually nothing to prevent him from swearing her in right now. Like he could do it today. But he's like saying, well, I want to have all the pomp and circumstance. She's like, I don't care about that. I'd like to do my job. But he's deliberately holding it off and using the shutdown as an excuse because she would be the final person to sign off on a discharge position to make those files public, to move those files toward being public. So that's absolutely part of what's going down. I'm going to float something here that like I really actually been wondering about. Like Trump has basically said it that he doesn't care if Congress ever comes back
I've wondered about that too.
into session. And we're already past the record that was set during Trump's first administration for the longest shutdown. It may be entirely possible that there's no intention of ever bringing Congress back, right? And that it's just one more way Trump could kind of rule by fiat if they can keep Congress shut down. It's like, sort of like the U.S. equivalent of dissolving Parliament, right? But we've never seen it happen in the U.S. context. But I got to say, like this administration, it wouldn't surprise me if we just end up with this dragging on and on and on. And if the game plan is to keep it out until the midterms.
And with this speaker, it would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, we have to sort of entertain all possibilities here because right now it's like the Republicans, especially at the federal level, have been dealt a sort of stunning blow that has rocked them a little bit, but they'll recover in terms of a backlash. And so one of the questions was, what can we expect in terms of how they would suppress free and fair elections at the midterms? Again, entertain all possibilities. They could keep Congress from functioning for that entire time. Trump's go-to to get stuff done at this point is declaring a state of emergency and then having presidential powers. I think there will be attempts at voter intimidation with armed people around polling places or threatening that type of action. Certainly the gerrymandering has already begun. And so that's going to be sort of a tit for tat. And we'll see how much Democratic states respond to that. And stuff we maybe haven't even imagined at this point. But one of the things that I think we should be very wary of is counting on another day like this past Tuesday at the midterms in 2026. They'll have had a full year to prepare for the result they want and not for the will of the people.
It seems pretty worthwhile to keep that British Empire, the British UK example kind of in mind. I think Robbie brought that up. If Trump wants to be a king, one of the main powers that's left to the British monarch is the power to dissolve Parliament. There were a couple of times that prime ministers actually suggested it to Queen Elizabeth, and notably Margaret Thatcher did at one point in order to try to hold on power in her own government, and Queen Elizabeth never took her up on it. But they know that exists, and that's actually a monarchical power in the UK. And it relates as well to the Epstein thing, because as this story is cooking here in the US, that's also a story with legs that overseas, over in the UK, because of the prince formerly known as Prince Andrew. It People are having a hard time trying to figure out if there's ever been another time in British history when a king de-princified his brother. Usually what happened in the Middle Ages is you wanted to de-princify somebody, you just chop their head off. And so what has happened here is that King Charles essentially used legal methods to chop his brother's head off, and Andrew was taken off of the role of the royal family. I mean, he's now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor after being Prince Andrew his entire existence. And he is implicated in those files. And I think that the British Crown and British Secret Service probably knows way more about what's in those files than any of us do. And that was the expression of what happened on that side of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And if you can bring down a prince, you can bring down a wannabe king with those files. I'm pretty darn sure.
Yeah. So that story is not over.
No.
And I haven't had a chance to read Nobody's Girl yet, the new book that came out posthumously from Virginia Roberts Jeffra. But I mean, it's on my list as soon as I finish my manuscript, because that book spells it out, and not all of the names are in there, but the names are actually in the legal filings, and so you can put things together. And yeah, I think that just want to keep that up there, because that's a signal of a deeper level of corruption, a long-standing system of abuse that reaches into the highest powers. And I think as we struggle to discern, what's happening in this country and figure out, all of the different power brokers, I think that book holds at a really important key.
Other questions y'all want to tackle?
I just want to pick up one little thread on the peeling away 10% of MAGA. We don't actually need to peel away any of them. Like, I just want to make this point, right? There comes a time when the work is not persuasion, it's resistance. And I kind of think we're at that moment. And, Jamar, you don't have on your t-shirt right now, but, your justice takes sides mantra, I think, is one that we really got to take seriously. I mean, yes, we want to reach out. Yes, we want to persuade. But the truth is, if you look in that MAGA core, they make up about 3 in 10, about a third of Americans. That means 2/3 of the country is not with that agenda. Right now, they've amplified their views by taking over one of our 2 political parties, by gerrymandering districts, by the kind of weirdness of the Electoral College. All of those things amplify this minority view into something that looks like a majority, but it is nowhere near a majority. So the real challenge for us is finding the power of the people that already exist and already agree on the basic principles of democracy and defending them. Right. And when we find people who are like really taking the axe and hacking at the foundations of democracy, I'm going to worry a little bit less about how many of them I can convince to kind of, like come over to my side. I'm just going to worry more about like taking the axe out of their hands.
So the California model, right? Or Sandwich Guy's model. Thank you for that beautiful segue into Sandwich Guy, which I'm sure was not intended. But Diana and I are big fans, I know, And so
Yes.
let's just a moment of celebration that one of the other breaking news stories today was that sandwich guy has been acquitted. And I was just about ready to send out a Substack on sandwich guy. Just to bring a little levity here. If you don't know, sandwich guy, what Sean Dunn is his name, but he's sandwich guy. Is this a man who a few weeks back just had it with the Border Patrol agents as part of the DC crackdown, wearing a white or pink polo shirt and carrying a sub sandwich, just took it into his own hands, started yelling. I think there were some obscenities in that. And then just, in his words, as an exclamation point, or maybe his lawyers, on his First Amendment free speech rights, threw the sandwich at one of the agents, who reported in this trial that it hit him with quite some velocity, such that he could smell mustard and onions. And it was honestly, reading the threads coming from the courtroom observers was a high point of my week. And so I thought I'd share that with all of you. But there's something actually substantive beneath it, right? There's the humor, and then there's also random guy in DC says, no, this is not okay, right? And what did he have to work with in that moment? A sub sandwich. And he takes off running, and now he's facing trial, and he has been acquitted. But there is something inspiring there, right? Just ordinary people going about their day and saying, wait, what? No, not this.
And Janine Pirro. I mean, how more absurd could this get? Janine Pirro was the lawyer who brought charges against him because she's the Washington district attorney or whatever now. And so anyhow, if you want to have a good time, go onto social media and read all the jokes, because clearly Janine Pirro couldn't cut the mustard. So
trust me, I've been gathering as many of the puns as I can, and so I'll send that out either tonight or tomorrow morning.
my favorite was, it's a wrap.
Yeah, it's a wrap.
It does go to the levity. You're right. I mean, there is a way to respond to fascism and oppression with humor, and I think that we saw people wearing these blow up costumes, right, and clown outfits, and and there's something that does kind of point to the absurdity of it, right? And the way in which, like, the ICE guys are kind of cosplaying, green berets and wearing their fatigues, and you got the clown with the red nose standing next to them. I mean, there's something that just goes, okay, yeah. They're all playing dress up. The difference is, of course, some of them have guns and are willing to use quite brutal, methods. But nonetheless, I think that kind of response is, I think, one of the great democratic tradition behind it.
Christy asked, I've wondered how to plan to celebrate next year's 250th anniversary of the U.S., the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And she said, I remember the bicentennial as a happy event, and I see nothing like that right now. So great question, Christy. I think there's primarily the way to celebrate the nation's history is to tell the truth about the nation's history, especially because what we're seeing from the White House and associated bodies is a bunch of propaganda, a bunch of mythology. So for instance, the White House has partnered with Prager University, which it's kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth to call it a university, because it ain't. It's a right-wing content mill. And they have this whitewashed version of the founding of the United States. So, one of the ways to counter that is through truth. One of the things that I'm planning on doing is, my dream is to host a Conscience of the State event, which would take place probably in June. And it's based off that Martin Luther King Jr. quote, where the church isn't to be the servant or the master of the state, but the conscience of the state, and reminding us as people of faith the role of politics, the role of government, the role of accurate history in remembering and commemorating this anniversary. Another thing I've got my eye on, it happens to be the 100th anniversary of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. This is the
Wow.
organization that sponsors and originated Black History Month. And so a way to commemorate the 250th anniversary is to commemorate the 100th anniversary of this organization dedicated to Black history. So those are some ways, in addition to sharing all the books, sharing all the resources, starting a book club, those kinds of things.
Yep. I've got one. I wrote it a year ago, or I guess wrote it right after Juneteenth became a federal holiday, which, by the way, means that my birthday is now forever a federal holiday because it's Juneteenth. But I wrote a piece about so I'm Christian. I'm married to someone Jewish, and I have been through that relationship celebrating the high holidays, right? And the sense of this time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they call it the days of awe, right? And it is these two holidays sort of I think of those kind of orbiting each other, and they kind of each holiday lends the other one some meaning. And I made a proposal in my Substack about treating Juneteenth and July 4th together and as holidays like that, right? And the time between them is something like the days of awe, and that we could actually have one defining the meaning of the other. That there might be something quite beautiful about that if we could, because I think a lot of white people don't know what to do with Juneteenth, right? They're like, okay, yeah, not sure what we should do. It's a Black person's holiday. I don't know. We're going to be co-opted, whatever. But I think this would be a way of kind of actually all of us fully pulling them together. And it prevents, I think, July 4th from becoming this jingoistic, militaristic, really ugly and kind of dangerous holiday that's about domination and those kinds of things, and bringing it back to liberty, right? Freedom, equality, all of those values.
Yeah,
That was a really good piece. I remember that, Robbie.
Oh,
I
thank
thought
you.
that was so smart. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just seeing that Jonathan in the comments said, how about some No King celebrations for the anniversary, right? I think something there too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's our holiday too. It's our holiday more than it's their holiday, right? In terms of what are we celebrating here? What are we really celebrating? And so, yeah, I could imagine a pretty raucous No King's Day across the country would be a really great way to reclaim that celebration. So I'm curious what might be planned around the country for that, because, I can say I think this is probably true for most of us here, that I don't know that I've ever felt more patriotic than I do right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to fight for this country and I'm going to celebrate this country. Yeah. And so, that's, I like the question, and I like kind of thinking about that already up front.
I do have my tickets for the Lee Greenwood Monster Truck Fest at the Kennedy Center already. So.
Awesome.
What about the UFC fight on the White House lawn?
Right.
Yeah.
Geez. I love your idea, Jamar. I'm on board. You asked me if to come, and I'll help in any way I can.
Nice.
So I wanted to draw attention to, it's not primarily a question, but a longer comment that I want to read because I find it really encouraging. And once again, it's my optimistic week here. So I want to give a shout out to a question from Sherry in the Q&A, but mostly to the comment part. The last live podcast, I asked the question about getting better organized, she said. And as a follow-up, I bought Local People, right, the book that Robbie and Jamar recommended, and Coming of Age in Mississippi, which I recommended. And at that point, she also pre-ordered A Beautiful Year. And I'm working on some things within my community, and I have found some partners. This absolutely brings me joy, right? Took some of these ideas, equipped, educated, read some of the things, and found those community partners. Just today, I received an email from a fellow churchgoer asking to meet to talk more about Christian nationalism and how her nonprofit can help spread awareness. I even bought the URLs, whatchristianscando.com, what Christians can, let's see, and what it means to be Christian.com to maybe help curate information as time allows. She's a single mom with a full-time job doing what she can. I just wanted to share that these conversations matter and are inspiring us and encouraging us to do more. Anything else we can do to help support your work beyond reading your books, Substack, etc. No, do this, and inspire everybody else on this call and everybody else who hears this to do those things too. Work in your community, find the other people working in your community. Honestly, if a few thousand people do this, that could be the change.
Yeah, find your people. I think that's the key. They're there, and they're probably other people like actually ready to go, but don't know quite what to do. And as soon as somebody sticks their head up and say, let's get together, I want to talk about this, I think you'll find your people.
Right. And she's not just talking, she's doing things, right?
Yeah.
Like thinking about the URLs, thinking about the, and organizing. So I absolutely love that. So thank you for sharing that. Oh, Diana, we have a question for you.
Oh, I was going to say, can I say I feel disoriented with your optimism, Kristen?
I know. I don't know what's happening here. I have no idea. Yeah. I'll try to be back to normal next week. It's probably throwing everybody off.
There's nothing
Diana,
stranger than a cheerful Calvinist.
Yeah, it's probably ruining our vibe. Diana, though, you had there's a question here about your book. And I'm trying to find it. There's a lot of questions here, so I'm not gonna get the name right. Oh wait, here, Anne. Anne said that she's trying to get her book at a local bookstore and is told that she has to wait for a second printing, and she had pre-ordered it at the end of October. What's up with this? Diana, tell us what's up with your book.
Well, I have heard that Bookshop and Ingram's one of the major distributors of books to bookstores. They're already on back order. And I spent quite a few hours today working with the publisher and trying to figure out what was happening. Apparently, Barnes and Noble and Amazon, sorry about the evil empire, do have books in stock that they're sending out stock to Ingram and Bookshop right now. That should be in place by Monday. So the back order should go off of some of these stores by Monday. Yeah, what a problem. I mean, honestly, thank you all so much for buying books, because this is what happens, is that when you all step up to the plate to buy a book that you think is going to help you and that you really are anxious to read, publishers sometimes don't quite get the numbers right, and they don't get the books always in the places where they need to be at the exact right times. Yeah. And so Macmillan is very sorry for that. They have said that they are doing their very best to make sure that that problem is corrected as quickly as possible.
And we're sending messages to the distributors about what kinds of books they ought to be stocking when they come out. Right. So that's important as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people say, oh, religion book or devotional, nobody's going to buy these things. So we'll just put them on the back shelf. But as I've been explaining on podcasts, yes, it is a book of meditations and it will take you through the year. But it's also a book that tells a story about a different kind of Christianity and how a different voice, a voice of love and justice, can sound in the world today. And so that's a compelling message, and you all are responding to it because you know it's a compelling message. And the booksellers are like going, what? A book with flowers on it is selling this many copies. So good for you. So thank you, everybody. And keep putting pressure on your local booksellers.
All right. We have time maybe for one more or closing thoughts, probably.
We're kind of quiet tonight. I think that we're sort of exhausted
bewildered.
Bewildered.
Don't know what to do with this much good news in 1 week. Right. I will say one quick, we've had a couple of people mention the Supreme Court. So, one of the dynamics we've been dealing with is the way that Trump has seized power is he's declared these fake emergencies over all kinds of stuff. Right. And so if he declares a fake emergency, he can go around existing guidelines and the Supreme Court has so far, through the shadow docket, given him kind of permission and some rope to run with. And it looks like, there's some weird stuff going on in the Supreme Court arguments where we got like Amy Coney Barrett and Sotomayor kind of along the same lines of questioning about tariffs, calling them taxes, which is what they are. And if they are taxes, that's not something the president has the ability to regulate. That's the job of Congress to regulate. So we'll have to wait and see, but I think there is some early signs that they may not quite just rubber stamp it. They did kind of early on say, yeah, we'll have to hear it later on, so go ahead. But it is worth remembering, though, that what he's doing is not lawful, right? This is not within the power of the presidency. What he's doing, he's declared these fake emergencies to try to get around the law. And it is the job of the courts. And by the way, it is the job of Congress to provide the checks and balances. And again, I just want to say, all we would need is a handful of Republicans in Congress. And they could also stop all of this by saying, oh, actually, that's the job of Congress. You can't go ahead and go around us this way. So far, we haven't found it. But if we get this other Congresswoman sworn in, we'll be one step closer to that.
Kristen, any other thoughts on that? Any punctuation you want to add? You want to throw us off with some more positivity?
More positivity. More positivity. See, that's it. I'm writing a book on positivity, and finally it's rubbing off.
He's converting.
Right. Well, I have to say, I think there's something to it in terms, I mean, not kind of pseudo positivity that masks reality. But, for those of us who are critics, and for those of us whose job it is to kind of study power dynamics and to track all of the things that are happening when many of the things are not good things, it can contribute to a kind of depression / apathy. And I'm all for kind of trying to grab that tailwind when you can get it, because it's not there all the time, right? But I still think, I know that we can turn this country around. All it takes is enough of us doing the things and coming up with new things to do. That is all it takes, even now. I think there was a lot of shock and awe. There was a lot of fear, very intentionally inflicted. And now it feels good to, be the sandwich guy and just say, no, no, not at all. Yeah. So I'll leave with that.
And I do think that a lot of people are finding that they're not alone.
Yeah.
I mean, what the shock and awe and the immediate just sort of overwhelmingness of it did is it really drove us all into our own corners where we were sort of huddled and scared and not sure who was safe or who to connect with. And now I think people are kind of coming out and going, well, wait a second, there are a lot of people to connect with. And the example of the Mondani campaign I thought was very interesting as well. They managed to motivate lots and lots and lots of young men in particular, which I think was really exciting, because that's been a real problem spot in our culture. And isolated young men becoming radicalized by the internet. And what did their campaign do? They put them in rooms together and gave them something to work on and said, we can do this. And they essentially created a team. And they had 100,000 people going out across New York, getting folks to polls and telling people to vote for this guy and that we could change New York. And those campaign workers believed it. And there were a lot of wonderful testimonies this week about people forming friendships and their lives changing because they actually work together on this project. So I think the more we can figure out ways of getting people to work together and getting their lives connected with other lives and talking and creating new lines of friendship, the better that we're all going to be.
Well, I think this election should remind us that the work isn't over, not by a long shot.
That's right.
But we do have reason to keep going. I often characterize justice as a journey, and on any long journey, you need some sign of progress. You need some sign that you are actually moving in the right direction. And I think that's what the elections were, at least for me. It wasn't to say that we've crossed a finish line or that we can rest on our laurels. It's to say that we can have an impact, we can move forward, and that the forces opposing us aren't necessarily stronger than the forces pushing back. So I hope it was an encouragement, just a sign, even as a memory going forward, that change is possible, progress is possible. And so we thank you all for joining us live, but also week by week, for subscribing, for sharing. Please continue to do that. If you haven't bought Diana's book, A Beautiful Year, go ahead and sell them out, put the second printing on back order as well, and make sure folks get that book in their hands for a daily dose of hope there. And thank you so much, as always, on behalf of me and my co-hosts. We appreciate you joining us for this special episode of the Convocation Unscripted Live. Please be sure to subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter, convocation.substack.com. And if you're already subscribed, send the link to someone you care about. Also, subscribe to our individual Substacks, and we'll see you at the next Convocation.